This is Leo, and this is Leo's roadmap to success. Now, Leo, a quick note, has a second case of Giardia. And his guardian and I were just talking about this. We think he probably got it at the dog park. So Giardia is a parasite. It's one of the few things the dogs can actually pass to humans. So if your dog does get it, now he is a puppy. If your dog does, well, you won't know that they have Giardia until you take it to the vet. For puppies, if a puppy gets lethargic, has diarrhea, or loss of appetite for longer than 1 day, you should take them to the vet right away. Puppies' immune system is very fragile and still developing until they're over a year, and a day or going longer than a day can turn fatal in a lot of cases. So Giardia, you want to treat it as quickly as you can. It's typically passed by feces being in water. There are other ways you can catch it as well. So a couple of things, precautions that I went over with the guardian is obviously teaching her not to drink water at the dog park. So she has a little thing, and there's a bunch of different contraptions. Hey, buddy. Yes, let's not get in the dog bed. He's like, but there's all sorts of good stuff in there. So there's a lot of contraptions you can get. There's a little thing that I've seen sit where it's like a half cup that you can screw on top of a water bottle, and you squirt from your water bottle and it fills it up. And you just hold it down and your dog licks it up. So there's all sorts of different contraptions you can get where you can let your dog have water from you and teach it to not go to the water bowl at the dog park. Now to do that, it's really a version of the leave it exercise. So the dog starts showing interest, you go away or ignore or plague, come up with something funny like nasty, and so the dog starts to go to the water bowl, you make a sound to get it to come to you and say nasty. So after a while, the dog goes to the water bowl and you say nasty, the dog turns around and walks and comes to you, and then you have your water and you squirt and you give them the healthy, clean water that you know is clean. And it could be that the dog got it from somewhere else. Puppies are just notorious for picking stuff up with their mouths, and they very easily pick it up about sit. That's passage train. We'll talk about that in a sec. So one of the things that I do is I always carry around one of these, a treat pouch, and they have different versions of it. The Guardian has more of a bag, but basically they'll have one of these carabiners. So I usually get a hand sanitizer, a thing of Purell like this, and I attach it to this, or you could, jeans or whatever it is. I like to do this because that way you have my poop bags, treats, and the hand sanitizer all in one place. So when we have puppies, until they have all their shots, they really should be airwalked and not walk anywhere the dogs get because their immune system is extraordinarily fragile. But basically, if one of these things is attached, anytime your dog walks anywhere that you don't like or you're questionable on, just pull a little dollop of it in there. And so let's say I have some Purell in his hand, dump his paw in there, work it in, a little dollop here, do this paw. So you do all the individual paws. Now, if your dog does have Giardia, you need to change the bedding and wash them very frequently. The Guardian is very much on top of that, but it can pass to you. I actually work with dogs. I'm going to work with another dog. I think it's somewhere in Hollywood or wherever. But anyways, I'm going to change clothes when I go to that dog because I might have a little Giardia potential to pass. Pretty low risk, but it's possible. And I just want to make sure we're being safe. So one of the things I recommend the Guardian do is get some baby wipes and just have it waiting by your door. Every single time you come in the house, just wipe his paws down. Because if he did walk on something, some parvo, or not parvo, but it could be anything, and then comes inside and licks his paw, that's typically where they get it. Or if he comes inside and walks and jumps up here, and then later on comes and licks this, it might have whatever the pathogen or whatever it is. So by just making sure that we're cleaning our dog every time he comes into the place, now if he has Giardia, he could be spreading it as well. But if he's clear, we want to just we want to make sure he doesn't get worse while we're treating him. But also, it's just not a bad idea to get when you have a young puppy. On our puppy classes, we make people wipe their puppy's paws down every single time they come out of the room, just as a safeguard. So, all right, so enough on Giardia. Let's talk about some of the other stuff we went over. The video above covers two different ways, really three ways of getting your dog to come to you. One is the traditional route, and then two alternative ways of calling. I'm not going to talk about the stuff that's in there because it's already in a video. But if you have difficulty with getting your dog to listen to you, you can watch that video and get some tips and tricks. Now, in the house, I asked the Guardian how much exercise he gets. Because he's at Giardia, he hasn't been able to be out as much. So we pulled out a couple different tricks. Now, I'm going to show you one of them. One of them is okay to do for some dogs. Other situations, it is not appropriate to do. If you do this and your dog starts whimpering or whining or acting like it's on crack or just getting really frustrated or anxious, don't do it. Some dogs can't see this at all. This is basically a laser. So it's a nice way that you can exercise your dog in the house When you're doing this on stairs, make sure you go on the baseboard up here. So if you have on the steps, you won't see it as it goes from one step to the next. So I usually do on the baseboard. But you can have your dog going around in circles, and it's just a fun thing to do. When you're doing this, make sure that you don't put it in the dog's eyes, of course. And then make sure, when I turn it off, I usually typically run around a corner somewhere, and then I kind of cap it. So now he didn't see it just disappear out of thin air. It went behind the table, then it disappeared. And you're going to see the dog, if you look at him, he's looking around. Where's the little red dot that doesn't have a smell? So this will, he'll spend a couple minutes looking for it. All right, you can come back to me. So when you do this, a couple things. If he looks here, he'll think it jumped off the floor and went here. So if he ever looks at it, put your hand over it or turn it off. This one also is a flashlight that has a laser component to it. We sell these if you want to buy one. But basically, this has an on-off switch, so it's constantly on, or the laser, it's constantly on. Well, a lot of them have a click. It makes a clicking sound. And dogs learn through association. That's where the clicker comes from. So a lot of times they click and the dog starts looking around for it. So what I do, if your dog, if it has a clicker, there's a sound that your dog's associating. Every once in a while, until the battery's out, and while I'm watching TV, I click it. Dog's looking around, no dot, click, again, no dot. So we desensitize them further. The other last thing about this, whenever anybody has this, they all decide that they're going to be Henry Mancini. We're conducting the orchestra. I can go like this. I don't have to move my whole arm to make it go. So if you do use a laser, again, make sure your dog's doesn't seem unhealthy. If you're questioning whether or not your dog's unhealthy about it, it's probably unhealthy. It can make some dogs very frustrated. And this will not calm your dog down. This is a good way to exercise your dog, but your dog's gonna be up for it for a couple minutes afterwards. He's still looking for it a little bit. So, all right, so another one that I have is I tell people to toss treats up and down the stairs. Just go to the top of the stairs, touch his nose with the treat, throw one down. When he goes down and licks it up, come up with a word, call it like Mexico. Then call him back to the top of the stairs, give him another treat and call it Canada. And keep throwing these treats up and down until the dog's like, you're crazy, I'm not going up there anymore. Or down there anymore. Now we know what the maximum number is. That's a very quick way of exercising him. And one other little tip that a lot of people don't realize is exercising your dog before you go for a walk can produce a much healthier walk. So if you get in a habit of maybe do 15 up downs on the stairs, then let him spend 10 minutes recovering and catching his breath. Then we put the martingale and the special twist elation taken for a walk. We took off that top level of energy. Makes it a lot easier for him to listen. I would also practice the leave it exercise. The guardian was saying leave it when we're on a walk, but she was not rewarding the dog for leaving it. So leaving it means look up and get something better here than what you're going to find on the ground. And if you don't do that and you're constantly pulling things out of the dog's mouth, eventually they'll stop letting you have it. So I would actually set this up where maybe in the house, put him on a leash and put three things up, targets, things he wants on the ground, and have an even better target here, and then have him walk into it. As he starts leaning for it, you say, leave it, he looks up at you, and then you start bringing the treat as you continue walking. So you help him practicing stepping over something that he wants to get something better coming from here. Eventually you can just say leave it, and the guardian may be just sufficient enough, but every once in a while you do want to give a treat, even when your dog knows it. But especially for a puppy, and they're still gobbling stuff off the ground, I would every single time I say leave it, he's getting something really great from above, and that just makes it easier to get him up and let him look at you. Now, a couple other things for the walk. I showed the guardian how to use a martingale. She was using a prong collar, which I don't believe in using. They're just a pain-causing device, and causes more problems than it helps. And I showed her how to add the special twist elation. Message me if you can't remember how to do that. I use 5 rules for a structured walk. So rule number 1, stay in your position. His shoulder is aligned with your hip. Rule number 2, keep your arm hanging right down, relaxed. If you're kind of tensing it up, you're off the side, you're flexing, you're going to put tension on the leash, and he's going to pull. Rule number 3, the correction is really quick, up and down. And make sure you have the leash short, so it's a short leash, but not a tense leash. So the idea is I can just go move my hand like this much, and it's applying the correction. But the idea with the correction is to do it so quickly that he can't pull against it. So a lot of people go pull and hold, and then pull back, and the dog's going to start pulling more. And if the dog goes in front of you and try to pull upwards, which is the correction, he's actually pulling back, and that's going to cause the dog to lurch forward. So when you're pulling, make sure it's very quick and you're proactive. Don't let the dog get too far in front of you. Again, his shoulder should be aligned with your hip. His chest should not be in front of your torso. Rule number 1, stay in your position. Rule number 2, relax your arm. If he lags from behind, let your arm go limp and dead, and let the rig do the work for you. Don't pull from behind. The only time I pull is when he tries to go in front. Rule number 3 is the correction is very quick, up and down. Rule number 4 is no stopping and sniffing. Now, to tell a dog you can't sniff on the walk would be cruel. So, but the dog's nose controls 60% of the brain. Beagles probably even more so. And so if we don't let him sniff, that's not very stimulating for them. And it's also not sit. Very good. So it's problematic. So what I do is one place on each block, I give the dog a 1 minute free sniff zone. They can sniff, they can roll around, they can lay down, they can sit, they can do whatever they want. So what I do is I get to that part of the block, I decide where a dog says it, not the dog. So I undo it around the leash around my wrist, and I say free. And I look at my watch, okay, you have 1 minute, and let the dog sniff around and do what it wants for 1 minute. Then now we're back to the structured walk. This will help him, because that way he gets a little bit of stimulation, but not so much that he can't pay attention to you. And then right now he's a puppy, he's not doing it, but eventually when he does start lifting his leg, if you have a dog that's reactive or showing you behaviors you don't want, I'm not a big fan of letting them mark on the walks. I let them pee at the beginning of the walk, at the end of the walk. Now the Guardian has kind of introduced the word potty in a way that I'm not sure if the dog completely knows. He doesn't have accents, although he did pee in here twice. He might have a UTI. If your dog suddenly starts showing you a new behavior like accents when they haven't had them, check. The dogs get UTIs pretty frequently. So what I would do is when you're on the walk, starting the walk, start off with those 10 treats. So you put the martingale on and we make him sit before he goes through the door. Then we get outside and we take up to 5 steps and say stop, or I say sit. And we sit, pop a treat in his mouth and say the word sit. Not good sit, just sit. Then take maybe 2 steps this time. Stop, sit, treat. 3 steps. Stop, sit, treat. 1 step. Stop, step. 5 step. He never knows how many steps you're going to take. But if you do this for the first beginning of the walk, after a while he's like, every time you slow down, he's looking at you to see what you're doing. And instead of paying attention to everything but you, now he's focusing on you, and everything else is kind of the afterthought. And after a while, what will happen is you'll stop and he'll just automatically sit down. And your friends will be like, oh my God, your dog used to jump up and pull like crazy. What happened? You're like, of course, we hired Dog on Problems. He showed us how to teach our dog to do it. But it's just rewarding the dog and jump-starting them by helping them practice. Before each walk, there's 10 steps. And after he gets really good, you might go, or every 5 steps. After a walk, you might go to 10 steps for treats. And after a while, the next stage I usually do is between every driveway on the block, somewhere in that house, I'm going to stop and he sits and he gets a treat. And then eventually maybe twice a block or whatever it is. But you want to do it so he never knows, but every once in a while when I sit, I get that treat, so that maintains that good behavior. Now, some of the other rules we went over, not allowing him on the furniture. I usually recommend X mats when that's the case. And especially with the Giardia, that also would be helpful because he's probably walking on your jeans and stuff. And it's possible another dog, you go to somebody else's house or you touch your ears, rub your hand and you pet another dog, you potentially could pass it. So keeping him off furniture is healthy in that regard. But also the higher he sits, more rank or social status he has. And so it allows him access to climb on top of his Guardian, which is not necessarily the most respectful interaction. So what I would do is, being Giardia friendly, I'm going to go ahead and just make sure I disinfect this little laser thing in my hands. Let me see, what else? Other rules: shouldn't be allowed within 7 feet of a human who's eating. He should have to wait for permission to eat his food, which the Guardian's already doing that, which is great. Let me see. Don't let him run up and down the stairs ahead of you. For dogs, whoever's in front is the leader, so I don't let them run outdoors ahead of me. And really, every time you cross the street, make him sit. Every time you go through a door, make him sit. It's just a more subordinate posture for dogs. All right, other rule, and then look for other ways to delay gratification or to, another rule is I make them sit before I go to the door. I go to the door, he's already on the leash because we're in an apartment, tell him to sit. If he sits, I open the door as soon as he sits as a reward. If he doesn't sit, I drop the leash and go sit on your bed and pull out a magazine and read it and wait 1 minute. It might be allergies. And so wait 1 minute, and then after 1 minute, go back to the door and command him to sit again. If he doesn't sit this time, the first time you wait within 3 seconds, then you walk away for 2 minutes. Next time I'll walk away for 4 minutes, then for 8 minutes. But you only say the command word once. The more you say it, the less you mean it. And you'll train your dog to stop listening for a specific command by overusing it out of context. So the Guardian also has a habit of saying good for everything, which is a very common thing for dogs, but your dog will learn about 80% faster if you mark the action with the command word exclusively. So every time your dog does whatever it wants, I tell it to sit. When he sits, I pet it and say the word sit a second time. A lot of people say sit, the dog sits, good boy. Well, then good boy means come, sit, lay down, poop, eat. It means everything. It doesn't mean one specific thing. All right, we went over passive training and petting with a purpose. Petting with a purpose is if he comes and jumps up on me, which he does a lot of, what I want the Guardian to get in a habit of doing is leaning back and kind of crossing her arms and just becoming still and boring. And as soon as he jumps off, then we're going to lean forward and then we're going to tell him to do something else. tell him to lay down, tell him to do a hand targeting, tell him to do a bump or whatever else. So otherwise, and he was already starting to do this, he jumped up, I would freeze, and he'd get down and I'd pet him, which I do with a lot of dogs, but then he started doing it to get that second pet. So now we're gonna add a third step. So he jumps up, I freeze. As soon as he jumps down, I lean forward and then give him an alternative command. And when he does that command, I reward him. If he doesn't do that command, then I don't give him any attention whatsoever. Half of how we train dogs is what we call positive. We're adding something. The dog comes to us, we pet it. We're adding attention. It comes to us, or it sits down, we give it a treat. We're adding something. We're giving it a reward. Well, if I'm petting him and he puts his paw on my arm, that's a domination move. So I can also train him by deducting something. And by deducting, I mean removing. So as soon as he starts doing something I don't want, I stop giving it attention. I retract my arm. I stop talking to him or whatever. I lean away from him. This is the half that most people never, ever tap into, and it's half of how they learn. So if you get in a habit of rewarding him for the right things through passive training and stopping your attention or affection when he does the wrong things, we can accelerate the process dramatically. Now also keep in mind, most people train their dogs to misbehave. So he goes over there, grabs a towel, and we get up and we chew on it, or chew him out, or correct him, or he's jumping up here. If I correct him for this, that makes him more inclined to want to do this. He likes to get up on the counters. So one of the things we need to make sure we don't have temptation on the counters. It's inconvenience for us, but it's only a short period of time, maybe a month or 2 months. It takes about 66 days to form a new behavior pattern. So maybe pick up our nice cushions and all the other stuff that's here. Everything on the shelf is so far away that even if it's just like an inch out of space, or maybe next time she'll leave it within my reach, and then he snatches stuff. And we train our dogs to misbehave because any attention from us is validating. So if I sit in front of the human, nothing happens. But boy, as soon as I chew that carpet, she's all over me. So clearly she wants me to chew the carpet to get her attention. Or I jump up, or whatever the case may be. So to counter that, I like to do something I call petting with a purpose. Petting with a purpose is redirecting the dog into something you want. So if he jumps up on us, like I talked about, he's telling me, or if he nudges me, he's telling me what to do. If I pet him, then that validates that. So if he goes to the dog bed, call it Jamaica. So every time the dog bed's word is bed. So every time he goes there and lays down, just say the word bed. You can give him a treat too, that's great if you have one, but just saying the word bed marks it sufficiently. So for petting with a purpose, if he comes up and nudges me or barks at me or paws at me for attention, he's telling me what to do. If I pet him, that validates his perception that he's in charge. So what I do instead is I tell him to sit. When he sits, I pet him and I say the word sit and only the word sit. If he's already sitting, ask him to sit over here, or ask him to lay down or bump or do something else. And so now we're rewarding him for desired actions or behaviors, and the inappropriate behaviors causes us to stop and become boring. And after a while, he'll start sitting in front of you to prepay for the attention. When he does that, make sure you do pet him at least a little bit, otherwise he'll go back to the nudging or whatever else it is. I usually use the watchword paycheck, but the guardian here lives by herself, so she's really going to have to be very diligent not to pet her dog with a purpose. People don't realize how often they do it without a purpose. But playing hard to get motivates him to want to do things for you. But if I have a job where I get paid whether I do my job or not, there's part of my job I don't like doing, I'm just not going to do it because nobody's going to chew me out and I get paid regardless. So what's my motivation? Dogs need motivation too. So we withhold our attention and give it to them when they do things we want. That motivates them to continue doing those things. And not only that, but it boosts his self-confidence because he's earning the affection, and it helps him see us as an authority figure because we're not doing what he wants. We're giving him a counter order, so we're rewarding him for doing so. And it helps him practice the sit, which is important as well. Let me see. I also went over a hand targeting exercise. When the guardian does that, make sure that you're flashing your hand. And once you flash it, it's frozen. You can't flash and then come back and get a treat and go there. So chop. And if he doesn't, and the guardian, make sure you have a speed for your chops. Some of the chops are kind of like this. Or if his nose is here, the chop is in front. Well, he's not really doing much work. So make sure it's on the side. And if he chop once and he doesn't go to it within 1 or 2 seconds, pull back and chop closer. And keep on chopping closer until he gets there. But follow the instructions in that video, because I think if you can get to the point where you can go like this and he just runs over and puts his paw to your hand, that's pretty awesome. That's that nice alternative recall that you'll need for the walk. Now, I have videos on my website for a lot of the other things that we went over. We went over structured walk. So we went over, I talked about structured feeding. So if you want to watch these videos or any other videos, the Guardian's already been watching mine. If you go to doggonproblems.com and click on dog training tips, if you're looking at it on a laptop, you'll see a search box at the top on the right side of the page. If you're looking at it on your phone, the search bar will be at the very bottom of it. I think it's the second or the first one. There's also an email one, so make sure you're not putting your search query in your email form. But you can search for structured feeding, a structured walk, and then get those tips for the structured walk. And there's videos on all sorts of other stuff as well if you have any questions. Is there anything else we forgot that we went over you want me to go over? All right. Well, let me just come over here because he's so cute in his bed. Well, this is Leo, the 10-month-old Beagle, and this is Leo's roadmap to success. Remember, everything you do trains your dog. Only sometimes you mean it.